Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making the second project in the Create 32 Ornaments from 10 Fat Quarters series. Today's design is a Santa Claus ornament. This design features the Christmas Adventure collection. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. My stack of Christmas Adventure Fat Quarters had 3 fabrics that were mostly red. There was this one, and this one. I had already cut into these two when I made the stocking, so I went ahead and committed to this one. And because I had the biggest piece of this, since it was brand new, I decided to make that sort of the main fabric for the Santa. I envisioned this Santa with 3 strong diagonal lines and foundation pieced. So I drew out my pattern, and I will describe this pattern for you later on in the video. And I cut it out from Pellon 50 non-fusible interfacing. And then you can see I also cut these 2.5-inch strips of each of these fabrics. And I'm going to do a foundation piecing technique to start. I also made a window template because I thought that it might be fun to see if I couldn't sort of fussy cut the words out, but it's really just an exercise in frustration because you can try so hard and then you know, cut it off diagonally and then you lose it. So I just decided that was fruitless, and I think it's a little more interesting anyway if you have just a hint of, you know, so it doesn't say merry and bright, maybe it just says merry, maybe it just says adventure, maybe it just says joy, you know, holly or jolly, or I don't know. I just think it's fine not to try to fussy cut, you know, an individual motif. I cut 2.5-inch wide strips from these fabrics, partly because I thought, well, that is the width of a jelly roll strip. And so you could do this with jelly roll strips. So I'm going to start with this bottom piece and then over across. It doesn't have to, it's not a specific angle or a specific amount, but I just start here and then just go across. And remember, you have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And so if I went way over here, I wouldn't get much of that at all. So I'm going to go about like that. And then my second fabric, I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to place it right on that angle. And I have white thread in my machine because I'm going to stitch that, fold it up, and then run a decorative stitch. All right, so let me line that up. It doesn't have to be perfect. From each one of my fat quarters, I cut 3 2.5-inch strips, and I cut them across the fabric so that they're about 2.5 by 22 inches. So now I'm going to press this, and I'm going to do a decorative machine stitch along here. There we go. There's the foundation with the stitching. And then for the next patch, I'll use this fabric, and we're going to go like this, but I want this one to actually overlap over one corner of this, so kind of like this. I can lay it exactly on the line and then 1/4 inch, and it should cover the rest of the foundation. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll place it right at the line, stitch it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, flip it up, and do the decorative machine stitching along this seam. Here's how it looks before I add the machine embroidery. I stitched it right like this, and then I flip it up, and it's going to cover all of this fabric. So I'm using a generous amount of these strips. It's just kind of tricky. Sometimes if one is short, it just won't cover the foundation. So I tend to be a little generous with these. And also I'm going to just leave this underneath. That's not going to hurt anything. So I'll pin this and I'll run the decorative stitch along here, and I will be right back. There we go. Now I'll flip it over and I'll trim this excess. And now you can really see what this is going to look like. Now I'm going to switch my machine to red thread. I'm going to do a little baby baste all the way around the outside. Here's my Santa front. Now with my fat quarters, I cut 8 backs from this fabric. But I cut them generously. I didn't want to have to, you know, I just kind of cut around them like this. Not too much because I didn't want to waste any fabric, but sometimes it's just a little fiddly to get it all to match up. So that's a little pro tip, that for the back of the Santa, just cut a little bit bigger. And I also, so first I cut the 3 2.5 inch strips, and then I cut the 8 backs. And then I wanted to cut as many hats as I could, but I could see that I was running out of fabric. And I only got a few hats. 1, 2, I think I got 5 hats. So all I have left from this fabric is just scraps. But I have more of this and more of this. So I will decide whether I want to make the hats out of this or this whenever I run out of this. You know, that's part of the challenge of making 32 ornaments from a stack of 10 fat quarters is, you know, using the fabric efficiently. So you can see here where I made that scant 1/4 inch basting around the edge. And now I'm going to stitch a full 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, leaving the top open. So I stitched around, and now I'm going to clip into those seam allowances a little bit. And then I'm going to trim it, probably even with that first line. There we go. And now I'll turn it right side out and stuff it. Remember, I left this open at the top, so I'm going to turn it through here. I have a chopstick that I'm going to use to be sure that those seams are all the way out. I'm going to set it down flat, have a look, making sure that these curves are nice and smooth. And now I'm going to stuff it through here, and I'll be back to gather up the top. You know, every once in a while the camera just isn't on when I think that it is. But you can see that I stuffed the Santa, and I gathered up the top, and I glued the head on. I started a second Santa. I just wanted to be sure that I showed you this step of how to gather up the top and to glue on the head. The head is a 1 inch ball knob. I've already done the faces. So I'm gathering around the top of the Santa, and then I'm tucking those ends in, and then I'll pull it tight. And then to secure it, I'm going to go across and then back a few times. And then down and out here. And then I just do a little knot, 1, 2, and then reinsert like a French knot, and then pop it through. And I find that that stays fairly secure, and at any rate, we're going to be applying a generous amount of glue right here, which will also help to hold those gathers. The head is a 1-inch wooden ball knob, and I've already done the face, and there are instructions for the face. I already have a video for this, and I will link to it somewhere on the screen here. So I'm going to apply a generous amount of glue to the underside of the face and press it onto the neck like that, and then press it on. And I want to be sure this is nice and secure. The glue is actually, I mean, the hanging loop is going to be suspended from the top of the hat, and so you know, I don't want the head to come off, right? So now I have 2 of them started, and you can see that they are slightly different. The angles are a little bit different. This has a bigger piece on the bottom, a little bit smaller here. And so I think that is kind of fun to show you that they're not going to be exactly the same, but just the idea that they are a 2.5-inch strip and a 2.5-inch strip, 2.5-inch strip, and this nice, strong decorative stitching. All right, next is the hat. So I have the hat cut from this red Christmas light fabric, and it's just one piece, so it's not like a front and a back. Sometimes I do hats with 2 pieces, front and back, but this is just one that's going to be folded, and I'm using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. Oops, I actually like to start at the bottom. And that way when I get to the top where the point is, I can kind of start 1/4 of an inch here and then taper to the tip. So I'm going to sew this up with a red thread and a 1/4-inch seam allowance tapering to the top. Here's how it looks. I'm going to trim a little bit here from the point, and I trimmed a little bit here at the bottom. I'll turn it right side out. And you know, whenever I'm turning these fabric pieces, I try to be pretty gentle. I don't want to accidentally poke through. So, you know, I have a lot of patience for this. I might even get a needle and pull the tip out. I'm going to sew on a pom-pom, so it's not super important, but I just want to make sure I get all of the height that I possibly can into that hat. Now I'm going to open up this seam allowance right there and sort of fold that under about 1/4 of an inch and try the hat on. The hat is designed to go all the way down the back of the head. That is a perfect fit. So I want to cover the back. So this goes all the way down to here. Now we have a beard and we have some trim that goes around the brim of the hat. I guess it's the brim, the upper edge of the hat. And I want to pull the hat back on the face so I can see all of his features. It's a little bit tricky because you want it all the way down in the back, but you know, lift it up in the front at the forehead so that the features show. So what I like to do is actually roll the top front edge up a little further than the back edge. And there's plenty of room in the pattern for that, and it's going to be just fine. So that's better. I don't mind if there's a lot of space here because we're going to do the trim around the hat and the beard, and there's lots of things to fill in that space. So that looks good. So first, I'm going to glue this seam allowance. So I'll put some hot glue actually in here and a little bit, you know, in here to kind of hold that seam allowance. First, the back. That looks good. And then I'm going to squeeze some glue in here. I can see that fold. So kind of right in there, and then I'm going to push in the front as well. So there's the front. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do the sides too, but I want to show you that you can see that the front is shorter. So the front of the hat is shorter than the back. Great. Okay. Now I'm going to just go ahead and squeeze out some hot glue inside the hat, but not too close to the edge. Closer to the cut edge of that seam allowance. So it's way inside and there's a generous amount of glue. And then lining up the seam in the back and pressing that on and pressing that against the wood. That looks good. It's nice and secure. Oh, also if you want to, you can add a little bit of stuffing in the hat, but that's not really necessary. Now I went to Joann Fabrics and I discovered this yarn. And I'm always looking for interesting yarn, you know, for beards or, you know, anything, gnome hair and pom-poms. I don't knit or crochet, but I do like the yarn. And so this yarn is it's by Lion Brand Yarns, and it's called Go for Faux Thick and Quick. And it feels like fur. It's like you're petting a kitten. And I know this is too big for a beard, although, you know, I did kind of consider it because look how cute that is. It kind of looks more like a gnome, right? Really cute. But then I decided I would use it to trim the top, the brim of the hat. So it's going to go around the hat like this. So I'll squeeze out a little bit of glue right here, press in the end, and then add a little bit more glue, not a lot, and then just work that trim all the way around the hat like this. So first the end goes in back, pressing it into the glue, and then it's just really important not to let it come too far forward so that it's covering the features, but just right along the edge. All right, so just a smudge of glue along the front here, and then all the way back around to the back. So it's not like a thick bead of glue, but, and I do have a little bit of the red showing, like if you really tipped it and looked from underneath, you would see a little bit of that. But I think it's more important to be able to see the features. Then I'll cut this off. This is really a fun yarn, and I can anticipate using it for some other projects. You don't have to get this exact yarn. You, of course, could cut a little strip of faux fur, about maybe ½ an inch wide, and that would work just as well. Now for the beard, I have a 4x6 inch index card, and I'm folding it in half. And I'm going to wrap it the short way, this way, 20 times, but all in the center. We only need about 1 inch. So let's see, let's try to mark off about 1 inch. So about like from here to here, 20 times. I'm using this cream colored curly mohair, but you can use any yarn you like, as long as you cover about 1 inch in the center of this folded over index card. Okay, I think that was actually about 24 wraps. Now I'm going to thread my machine with the cream colored thread, and I'm going to stitch across and back. Here we go, this will be the beard. So let me tear out the card. And there I have this little beard. This is all we need though. We're just going to glue it right across here like this. Nice and low. You might think you want to put it up right underneath his nose, but don't do that. From the edge of the hat to the edge of the hat. We're folding it in half like this, so that sewn seam is going to go right along the bottom of his chin there. Right along there from ear to ear, like where a chin strap would be. And I'm pressing the yarn into the glue. It's nice and low. And I like when it splays out like this. I like that look. But you might want it to be a little more compact. I'm going to add a little bit more glue in here so that this will press down. Great. Now don't worry, if you're concerned about this big open spot, we are going to put a mustache there. Now for the mustache, it's very easy. Just going to wrap, hold this end, and then wrap 1 and 2 and 3, maybe 4 times, and then cut that off, and then wrap it all the way around, and then tie it together. Now you can do this any way you like. Basically, it's just 4 figure 8s tied off in the center. You can even use a separate piece to tie it off if that would be easier. I know when I do it, it's almost automatic. And if you haven't done this technique before, I understand it can be a little bit challenging. I'll glue this on and then I'll demonstrate it one more time. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of glue below the nose and further below it than you might think, because when I press this in, it's going to kind of fluff up and fill in that space. I think I'll put the glue actually onto the center of the mustache. And that way I have a little bit more flexibility with exactly where it's going to land. There we go. He's so cute. Look at that. Adorable. All right, so I will do this one more time, just in case I went too fast. I'm going to draw about 6 inches out and hold it with these 2 fingers in my left hand. I am right-handed. Then I'm going to go around 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then I'm making an X there. I'm cutting it off. And then I'm going to go around the entire bundle, including the first yarn there, all the way around, a complete circle. Then I'm going to take the original end, cross over, and tie it off in the center into a square knot. And I'll just save this for my next one. Now next, I have a pom-pom to sew onto the tippy tip of the hat. This Santa is going to hang from the top of his hat. Sometimes I do the hats where they fold over and we'll put a jingle bell or a pom-pom right here. But this time I just thought we've got so much going on right in the center with all of this fur and the yarn and the beard and everything that this is just kind of overkill and it's just kind of too much stuff in the same area. So I'm going to put the extra large pom-pom. I don't know. I think this is probably about 1 inch. You could put a smaller pom-pom. That's just what I have. And I chose white, but you could use any color. I have my craft thread. It's a kind of a heavy-duty thread, crafting and quilting. Okay, I have a knot in the end of my thread, and I'm just going to stitch through kind of from the side through the top, and that knot is not really going to want to pop through. That's okay, because this pom-pom is so big that it's going to be disguised. When I sew through the pom-pom, I'm making sure that I'm getting right through the center, that little hard spot in the center, because I want to make sure that the pom-pom is very secure and I'm not just sewing through the fluff, but I'm actually all the way through the center. Okay, I'm going to sew through it a couple of times, but I just want to make sure. And sometimes the pom-pom goes off center. That's okay. You know what I mean? It tilts a little bit. It's not like exactly straight up, but then sometimes it is straight up. So either way is fine. So I'm just kind of stitching across through the tip of the hat, and then I'm poking through, trying to find that center where I can feel it's very secure. Now that's 3 times through, so I'm going to secure the thread in the back and knot it off. Okay, now finally, we will add the hanging loop. I'm going to use the red and white baker's twine for the hanging loop, and I'm going to go right under the pom-pom. Now sometimes the hanging loop sort of interferes with the way that the pom-pom is going to point, and that's all right. So I just, sewed a length of baker's twine through and tie Hide the ends in an overhand knot, and we're done. Adorable. Now, since I already started this other one, I'm going to finish that one, and I'll be back to show you how they look. There are two patterns that I use for this design, and I will describe how I made them. The Santa, the body, is 4.5 tall and 3 3/4 wide. So I started by cutting a rectangle that size from this graph paper, and then I folded it in half. And this top edge has to be around 1.5 inches, so that's 3/4 doubled. And so I go across 3 squares and then taper along here and make sure this is rounded, and then this is like a dip, right? So it dips down like this. It doesn't go straight across, but it dips down. And yours doesn't have to be exactly the same as mine, but as long as it's got approximately the same proportions, you'll be fine. 4.5 tall, 3 3/4 wide, folded in half, and just and make sure there's 1.5 inches at least at the top. That's about the right amount. And I would never use my fabric scissors for that. Then for the hat pattern is 4 inches tall and 3.5 across. Then the same thing, folded in half, and this time you want to make sure you go straight up for a little while. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's about 1 inch. So go straight up for about 1 inch and then taper into a point. Easy. And remember, there's only one, you only have to cut one piece for the hat. It's not like 2 pieces that are sewn together. Just one, folded in half, stitch, and that's your hat. I finished 3 Santas. And you can see they're the same, but they're just slightly different in the way that the fabrics landed. But I made them all exactly the same way. I have enough of these for the backs, and I have one more of these for the hat, and I have plenty of these strips, so I might have gone a little overboard cutting out 3 strips, but you never know. So I'm going to probably wind up cutting the balance of the hats from this, or maybe this. I think I have enough to maybe cut 1 or 2 from this. Are you keeping track of how many fabrics I've used so far? I only added 1. This is the only new one for this design, so I'm doing pretty well, I think. Let's see. Okay, I've actually used 7 fabrics so far, but I think I can do it. I'm going to finish up the total of 8 of these Santas, and I'll add them to my bulletin board. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.